Welcome back, WNST, Charleston, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're merging the brands. I'm wearing the old school WNST.net hat. That will get you to the new website, as will Baltimore Positive, as we head to Houston, Texas, for a crowd of very few. Luke Jones is familiar with that. He was at the Ravens game on Sunday. Owings Mills all week long now, and lo and behold, Luke Jones, Steelers hold serve, right? So you got a victory there. Joe Burrow looks like he can play a little bit, runs around a little bit. They can figure out a kicker. Half the league needs to figure out a kicker here. Whose idea was it to move back this extra point, by the way? Whose idea was that? Somebody that wasn't a kicker.
I believe Peter King was someone who was pretty vocal about it way back when.
I'll blame him on it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but I thought it was interesting. I forget who said it. Was it Jay Feely maybe? But this is one of the byproducts, I think, of not having a preseason. One, there are very few kickers who are even in the vicinity of what Justin Tucker does year in and year out. But two, that whole operation, as successful as the Wolfpack has been and all the continuity, and there's just this expectation that they roll out of bed and their operation's just going to work, right? I mean, it's been that way now for going on the better part of a decade. Those three together, Sam Cook, Justin Tucker, and Morgan Cox. But there's a lot that goes into that, and you have to really work at that. And there's a process to what they do, and they talk about it every summer or every spring, I guess, in most cases, where they kind of they have to start over a little bit.
I bet if I gave the truth serum to John Harbaugh and said Billy Cundiff, if I just said that to him, right, like literally. Because I don't know that he doesn't think much about that. Now, Tucker missed a couple kicks a few years ago, right? I mean, sort of famously, and hard on himself, still selling some Rofo. I see that they're still giving him the chicken outfit, not me. But we don't hear or think much about him, and I think even more so, not thinking much about Justin Tucker and Sam Cook when they're like on a milk carton on the sidelines wearing purple uniforms in L.A., right? Like we're kidding around. We kidded Sam Cook about that when we saw him. And the next time he's going to have to run on and make a big kick with 10 seconds left to go in the game this year, there won't even be fans raining down. So from the golfer mindset of all things are quiet, I am still water, if you're going to be that guy, this is a year where the kicker shouldn't have the yips in that way.
You wouldn't think so, but Justin Tucker kind of said it might be the opposite. The fact that he might go to Heinz Field on Thanksgiving night and need to make a game-winning kick, and not having any crowd noise, not having that hostile environment, he said could almost be a little unsettling in that way. So we've talked about this a lot with baseball in terms of which players might thrive, which players may struggle in this kind of environment. And I think not to the same degree, but I think there's some parallels you can take with football. But it really was amazing. I mean, even Monday night, Stephen Gostkowski, considered one of the better kickers in NFL history, a longtime kicker of New England, replaced a legend for the Patriots in Adam Vinatieri. And he misses, 4 kicks? He did make the game winner, which was a chip shot. But when you're having that kind of a night, there is no such thing as a chip shot.
Dude, you brought up the big 3 words, the ADG. You brought up Al Del Greco, and yeah. I saw that on Twitter.
And then I tweeted about Gary Anderson also after he missed another kick. So it was just wild.
I've already brought up Billy Cundiff in this segment, right?
You mentioned Cincinnati missing the kick. Cleveland replaced their kicker on Monday. It's one of those things, and it's so funny because I can think back to conversations you and I had 4 or 5 years ago where we would talk about the fact that the Ravens would get inside the red zone and they'd be fine then. And I would kind of bang the table and say, no, you need to score touchdowns, which, by the way, is still true. The name of the game is scoring touchdowns, not kicking field goals. However, there is still a very definitive need to have a kicker, whether we want to value it as one of the most important things on a roster or somewhere in the middle, which I'm still inclined to say it's somewhere in the middle. But even in the Ravens case, look at Sunday's game. You score 5 touchdowns. Great. If you have a kicker who misses 2 extra points, now it wouldn't have mattered on Sunday, but you miss 2 extra points, you're missing a field goal every couple weeks. That starts to add up. That's quite a few points then that are being left off the scoreboard. So even if you're a team that has a proficient offense that's really good in the red zone and scoring a lot of touchdowns, you still want that. And I think while we could certainly debate the merits of some of the other, I mean, if Tucker's in a class by himself, look at the second tier guys, and we could certainly debate the merits of how much you spend on that and how much value there is to that. But there's a line of demarcation that you get to where if you don't have a guy that you can depend on to at least make field goals from 45 yards and in, boy, I mean that really becomes a major problem. And I mean, it nearly cost the Titans a football game on Monday night. So it's one of those things that, where does Justin Tucker rank in terms of most valuable
Actually,
Ravens?
it was Tuesday morning, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, yeah.
It was 1:30 in the morning.
I was already in bed at that point.
I had just woken up. I'm an early riser. I fell asleep on the Pittsburgh game around 7:45, and I woke up at about 1:12 a.m. And I saw, there's a minute 46 left to go in this one. I'm going to put it on.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how my day began on Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I tapped out. I think it was early fourth quarter.
What weirded me out is I put the television on, and the college guys are doing the pro game, and I'm like,
they did a really good job.
I said to Jen, I'm like, is that Kirk Herbstreit? Like, yeah. I was like, it was sort of like, it would be like seeing Mike Tomlin in a Raven hat or something. You'd be looking at him like, is that Mike Tomlin? It was weird to me.
Yeah, he and Chris Fowler did a really nice. You could tell those two really prepared because they did not sound like college guys calling an NFL game. They sounded like two NFL, play-by-play and analysts. They did a really nice job. So I liked what I heard from the new Monday night crew on the late game. I did think that summed up ESPN's approach to Monday Night Football and how they just have not found that A team, so to speak, that they have a new crew. And they're doing a game that starts at 10:20 Eastern.
But by the way, it's kind of disgraceful when you consider how awful it really has been the last, since Chucky, sure. Right? Like them taking a gander on people while like Tony Romo's good at this, and they get a guy that doesn't even really want to be there, wants to go play football. It's real, and they put Booger McFarland on the sideline, and he's not any good to begin with. And
the Booger cart was. I mean, you still will see viral social media videos of fans just completely going berserk over the Booger mobile blocking their sight line. They pay for these great seats six rows behind the bench, and the Booger mobile is blocking their view. But it does speak to, one, Tony Romo's an exception, not the norm, in terms of someone who comes off the field and is just fantastic at it. I mean, typically, even the best former player analysts, it takes them a little while. It really takes some work. And that's not to say that Romo hasn't put in the work to be as good as he is, but he had such a natural ability to just walk into that world and be not just good, but excellent at it. So, I mean, ESPN tried to do that with Jason Witten. Clearly that didn't work out, to the point that he's still playing again. But it is tough. But I did find some irony in the fact that they're talking about a new team. And look, I like Louis Riddick a lot. I think he's someone who will take a little bit of time to grow into a live game analyst rather than being a studio guy. But he knows football so well. I think he's someone who, to the point that you and I had in a previous conversation, there isn't a whole lot of fluff about him. There isn't a whole lot of BS. He wants to talk about the game, and he loves the game, and he'll really break it down. So, it might not be as much for the casual fan who's just, kind of watching a game for the sake of it, but someone who really wants to learn the game, he's going to be good in that role. But I did find it pretty funny that they have this new Monday Night Football crew, and they're not debuting until after 10 o'clock Eastern time. So it just speaks to ESPN just continuing to whip.
Anyway,
but Fowler and Herbstreit were really good in the first game, and I mean, the NBA and ESPN has played around with that format a little bit, where they've had some of their college guys do some college or do some NBA games, and vice versa. So maybe that's something that you dabble in a little bit more. And we've talked about it. I mean, ESPN is clearly cut budget big time.
Well, Schefter was doing the NBA because he loved it, right?
Exactly. So maybe you see a little more cross-promotional efforts like that. But I did think that was fun. But to your original point, Pittsburgh, Ben Roethlisberger definitely looked rusty early on. I thought he looked better as the game went on. And I'll go back to what I said and what I wrote in my predictions for the 2020 season as it relates to the Ravens. I don't think they're going to run away with the division by 6 games like they did last year by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think Pittsburgh, if Roethlisberger is anything close to what he was pre-elbow injury and what we saw Monday night, I don't know if I'd say 100 or 95% or 90, but he wasn't 40% of himself with that defense. I think they're going to be a team that probably not looking at them seriously challenging the Ravens for the division, but I think they're a team that's a legitimate playoff contender, and we'll see. I mean, that defense is pretty darn good. But with Roethlisberger, how does he look over the course of the season? Does the elbow hold up? And as I mentioned, as the night went on, he started making a few more throws that looked a little bit more like the old Roethlisberger. Doesn't have the same talent level that he had a few years back, but he does
Yeah,
have
it
a
helps
couple
when you have
receivers.
Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell.
Oh, no question.
That would have made Joe Flacco look pretty good too.
Yeah, and I mean James Conner again dealing with an injury. I mean a kid who's shown a lot of ability, but just has had some struggles staying on the field the last couple years. So he's got a couple guys he can throw to. I mean Smith Schuster and the rookie Claypool, and I mean they have some guys who can make the plays. Deontay Johnson, but it's certainly not the Steelers of old with Hines Ward and Antonio Brown and Mike Wallace and go down the list. So I think Pittsburgh, and I thought this before Monday night, they're very clearly, in my mind, the second best team in the division. They were last year, even without, I mean, they had Duck Hodges running around back there, who's on their practice squad now, by the way. They get Roethlisberger back. And, like I said, I thought he looked okay. I thought he looked better as the night went on. And, they take care of the Giants, which, not a big shock there. But I think there's even Cleveland, as terrible as they look Sunday, I do think there's an argument to be made that each of the other three AFC North teams could be better than they were last year. Certainly Pittsburgh. I think Cincinnati with Joe Burrow will get better as the year goes on, to the point where maybe by the end of the year, that's not a layup by any stretch. Cleveland, the talent's there, but we've been saying that for a couple of years now, and it doesn't seem to matter.
Didn't look there on Sunday, did it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you saw it. You saw Odell Beckham Jr. there, but you saw a guy who just wasn't into it. You look at that drop he had late in the second quarter, and then what that meant for the Ravens going down the field and with less than a minute to go after they missed the field goal. I mean, it was just.
Those are my favorite kind of players to dislike as an adult.
Fair.
When I root for or against whatever professional wrestler we get, the guys that pop off and make an ass of themselves and get themselves thrown out of New York and then wind up in Cleveland at 0-1. I don't feel sorry for those cats. I really don't. No matter what league they're in, no matter what sport they're in. My dad called them hot dogs back in the 70s. That's just – and I'm glad the Ravens aren't a haven for that, quite frankly, because as a fan, I do want a representative team to root for. I think Lamar makes it a lot of fun to root for the Ravens right now. It's fun being a Ravens fan. We should – as I go to Houston this week, Mark Vandermeer was on with me, and Mark, the voice of the Houston Texans. I asked him about going to Kansas City last week, and asked John McClain as well, and we have Steph Stradley on. We're going to have Butch Alsander, former WPAL, on, some people from Houston this week. You can find all that out at Baltimore Positive at WNST.net. But I asked Mark, and Mark said, you know what, after all I've been through, he's like the Larry Rosen of the department, right? So he has employees. He had to send people there. He said, when I get off the elevator in Kansas City at the top floor, he said, I just felt lucky to be there. Yeah. like that there's going to be a game. I'm here. We're going to call it. We made it here. That there is little victories in all of this at this point in our lives in the plague, right?
Sure. No question about it. I mean, as much as I said it was weird to you on Sunday, being there and seeing the glass partitions between the reporters and the press box, and everything that went into that, and an empty stadium.
You had your own booth? Tell me about it.
I mean, just glass. I mean, it wasn't a full-blown booth. It was just kind of the glass set up on your table. So you still had the rows. They had every other seat. I mean, I say every other seat, but clearly you've seen that press box when it's fully crowded. I mean, you're not shoulder to shoulder, but you're pretty close to being shoulder to shoulder. So we were spread out. They had probably I don't even know if it's glass, probably plastic, whatever it was, kind of partitioning each workspace. But just the strangeness of it, the cardboard cutouts, the tube men, the little tube people that were popping up that I didn't notice until the game had ended. I don't know if they were using those during touchdowns or what, but it was just another bullet point to add to the strangeness of it all. But that said, yeah, you did feel pretty special to be there, and just the fact that they were playing football. I mean, it's weird. We talked about that. It'll continue to be weird, even when fans come back at some of these various stadiums, knowing that it's not going to be full capacity. That's weird. I mean, it was weird seeing Kansas City have 14,000 at Arrowhead Stadium on last Thursday night for the opener. I mean, it's strange. Denver on Monday night / Tuesday morning had, I think they said 500 friends and family that they just kind of invited so they could do a dry run of some of their protocols, because I think their next home game, they're going to allow a reduced capacity. So, I mean, we can certainly debate the merits of whether they should or not, but some teams are. So you hope it goes well. You want it to go well. I mean, ultimately, we're all rooting for all of this to work because we want football, and we want people to be able to watch it. I mean, that's the whole point of this.
This is the point where I say wear your damn mask, right?
Yeah.
Like for everybody. Like if you want week 10, we better not be filling up the hospitals with COVID patients, right?
Well, I mean, we just want people to have common sense. I mean, of course, and these teams certainly. I mean, they're weighing, the cost effectiveness of this. Quite frankly, I mean, to open up your building for 7,000 people, you might say, hey, that's no problem. I mean, a capacity of 71,000, that's only 10%. But you got to think about the stadium workers and security and all the different elements that go into the game day. I don't want to say production, just the functionality of it. If you're going to have
the
people,
toilets flushing, literally.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have all that. So there's a cost to that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not losing sleep for Steve Bisciotti or the Rooney family or any owners in the NFL losing some money this year, because they're going to be fine long term in terms of the profitability. We talked a lot about that with the MLB owners and their fight with the players about trying to restart the season. But there is an element to how do we do this in a way that makes sense. And I mean, that's clearly what teams have been wrestling with, in addition to just having the blessing of city and state government to be permitted to do it. So there's a lot that goes into it, but seeing these games played this weekend and knowing
they should just do what Trump does, move the games indoor, invite everybody, tell them to leave their mask on. I mean, that's what the president of the United States is doing this week. So, while we're having football games with no one, he's defying state law in Nevada. So, I mean, there's that going on too. So.
But it's just a matter of wanting this to work. And week 1 was fun. It was certainly a lot of fun for the Ravens. And now the next step, and John Harbaugh was even asked about this on Monday, and he didn't have a whole lot to say about it because, frankly, he's not thinking about that element of it. But going on the road, understanding what the protocols are going to be, and knowing that there's a different element when you're going on the road. We saw this happen in Major League Baseball. I mean, summer camp went really well in terms of these teams just training at their own stadiums. And yeah, the Orioles played a couple exhibitions against Washington and Philadelphia. So, short trips, no big deal, right? But you start going on the road, and even though a baseball road trip in 2 or 3 cities is a different animal than what you're doing in the NFL, where you're going to a city the night before, playing a game, going home. It's very cut and dried and much quicker. But we saw that the travel element was what really made the baseball problematic in terms of having a few outbreaks. Now, fortunately, it seemed like it stabilized a little bit after the Marlins and the Cardinals, but still something that they have to be very vigilant about. So it'll be interesting to see what this week looks like for the NFL in terms of the teams that traveled and making sure that players aren't testing positive. But that's going to be kind of the next step in this progression for the Ravens from a logistical standpoint. And then, you are going to Houston, taking on a Texans team that lost and did not look particularly impressive against Kansas City, but still a team that has a lot of talent. And you have Deshaun Watson, who we didn't see the good Deshaun Watson in Baltimore last year, and the final score reflected that with the way the Ravens just dominated. But playing at Houston and knowing what Deshaun Watson can do when he's on, when he's playing at his highest level, you'll take him going up against any quarterback in the league. He just hasn't found the same level of consistency as you see with Patrick Mahomes or even as you see with Lamar Jackson.
All right. Well, buckle up. We've got a week here where we're going to like wait around like a normal football week. We're undefeated. The Steelers are undefeated. The Chiefs are undefeated. And the Texans are scuffling right now. We got the Chiefs coming across the hill on Monday night. That'll be the next big one. I know you miss me at the games. I mean, you think they could fit me into a little separate booth? I won't sit anywhere near you. We'll see how it goes this week here. I'm 1-0 at home with a cat, so there is that.
There's that positive spin that everyone, like I told you, I saw some of my friends on social media having a small get together outside, tailgating and watching the games outside. So people are trying to adjust on the fly, but get into a normal week. Looks like Ronnie Stanley will be okay with the left ankle. John Harbaugh expects him to practice this week. We'll see over the next couple of days. Of course, you can check out the injury report at WNST.net, as I always post about that. But for the most part, I think you have to feel good about. I mean, not for the most part. You have to feel good about where the Ravens are, but going on the road is a different test. And as I mentioned, not just the challenge of winning on the road, but also now the extra element of making sure everyone's staying vigilant and doing what they need to do as far as the travel piece, and not wanting to have anyone test positive game day or any time after that. So it's just something else to think about. I don't think it's something that is at the forefront of John Harbaugh's mind, but that doesn't mean the players and coaches aren't going to be careful.
You can find him, Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net, Owings Mills, Camden Yards, on the interweb, and out at WNST.net and Baltimore Positive. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're loading up on that coffee in the morning. Chicken is perfect on Sunday. My wife brought me home one chicken breast in a box to put on a salad for dinner on Friday night. And it was so good that I wanted a second piece. I almost got back in the car and went back down Key Highway. But big thanks to Royal Farms, as well as our friends at Raskin Global. Leonard Raskin will be on this week. All of our sponsors are going to have homes on the new site at Baltimore Positive. I'm looking forward to launching that at some point later on this week into next week. I will be in Houston for all Ravens coverage on Sunday. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking. Baltimore Ravens and Baltimore Positive.